Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight, we invite you to descend into darkness with a chilling anthology of horror stories. This is episode 37. Let the nightmare begin. Ashes in the dark. The scratching of graphite on paper. The short, whispered phrases. The gentle, distant ticking of a muffled, old grandfather clock. These are my recollections of my time talking to Daniel Mercer in January 1980. I was called in to see Mr. Mercer at short notice. My time in Boston was brief, but just 2 days before I was supposed to leave, I was contacted by a colleague of mine employed at the Enfield Sanatorium with the details of a rather peculiar case which he suspected would pique my curiosity. It did. Mr. Mercer had not talked in 18 years by that point. Before his internment at the facility, he had been an electrician of some success, running his own business out of a small, modest rental unit down on the east bank of the river. At 32, he married a woman named Evelyn Carter, and a year later, and just 2 months before he was taken in by my colleague, they were given a baby girl who they named after Daniel's mother, Lydia. One afternoon in August, when the mercury peaked at 93 degrees, Daniel Mercer disappeared. He had been walking through Boston Common, where he stopped at a cafe, presumably to visit the restroom. Witnesses reported seeing him enter, marked out in their memories by his red hair and pencil mustache, but not seeing him exit. The alarm was first raised when Mercer did not arrive for his 4:15 appointment of the doctor's. He was usually fastidiously punctual, at which point the family doctor called Evelyn. For the next few weeks, she searched everywhere she could for Daniel, all the while desperately trying to look after their baby daughter. She got the police involved on the second day, and while they did their best, searching as much of the local area as possible and interviewing witnesses, every lead they followed turned up cold. After a week, police involvement was severely stepped down. After 3 weeks, the search was called off. That evening, a dejected Evelyn Mercer walked home, heartbroken at what, she assumed, was her husband running out on her and leaving her alone with Lydia. Slowly and sullenly, cradling a child who cried whenever the wind picked up a little and brought a chill reminder of imminent autumn to her cheek, she walked down Dartmouth Street towards the river and came to a stop outside the door to their small apartment. There was a man curled up on the step. He was naked save for a thin piece of dirty cardboard that he fiercely clung to himself. Nowhere on his body could a single hair be seen growing, and his skin was ugly and burned, blistering painfully in places where the dull red flesh flared up into yellow, pustulant time bombs. Gently, she laid a single tender hand on his shoulder, and the man bucked and reared, back arching in pain as he swerved around. With a sharp cry of horror, Evelyn saw that this man, under his melted flesh and scarred face, was her husband, and worse, that there was fear in his eyes. The doctors did their best to help him. Over the course of the next few months, he stayed at the Massachusetts General Hospital at Cambridge Street, where he was treated for his burns and given an in-depth medical examination. Aside from the superficial burns and scars, though, Daniel Mercer seemed uninjured, and once he had recovered from the external damage, they had no choice but to release him. According to Evelyn, he had seemed all right in the car on the way home, if a little jumpy at times, and, when not terrified and paranoid, at the very least pensive. In all the time that he had been kept in the burns ward, he had not said a word, other than certain terrified screams at the sight of needles. He had no such fear before. She seemed to think that he simply needed to recover from whatever shock he was dealing with, and he'd eventually open up to her. When they got home, she left him alone for a couple of minutes in order to tend to Lydia. While she changed the baby's diaper, she heard a thud from the other room. She walked in to see Daniel collapsed on the floor, knife slipping from his bloodied hand. He'd grabbed the blade as soon as possible, and it was obvious, hacked viciously at his wrist, as if trying to extract something from the flesh. Through her tears, Evelyn dragged him back out and into the car and drove as fast as she could to the hospital. This time, Mr. Mercer would not be released. After a brief stay at the hospital, Daniel was transferred to the nearest mental hospital, the Enfield Sanatorium. 18 years later, he was still being treated there. In all that time, he hadn't uttered a word, and the truth of his disappearance, nearly 2 decades ago by that time, remained a mystery. I finally met Mercer on the 8th of January. The man who I saw sitting in the comfortable leather chair of my colleague's office barely resembled the photographs I had seen from the case files. Whereas he had once been a somber, handsome man, dignified and smart in his dress sense, this person looked as if he barely remembered how to put on his own shoes, which, due to the still strong suicide risk, were slip-ons. His once characteristic red hair was gone save for a few thin clumps that still poked out of the gnarled, damaged flesh of his scalp. His once neat mustache, too, was gone, replaced with a scraggly layer of unshaven fluff. Mercer had not been allowed near a razor for nearly 20 years. "I shouldn't let you in there by yourself," my colleague said to me as I prepare my equipment, separated from the patient by a single door. "He's still a risk." "A risk?" He nodded. "The poor man is paranoid beyond all belief. Screams wordlessly at any warder that tries to touch him. We had a nurse a couple of years back try to clean up some food he dropped on himself. You should have heard the howls at her touch and her terror as he tried to bite her. My word. And when we brought out a sedative and a syringe for him, his animal fear. Good God, I muttered. Tales of violence were not uncommon in our field, but to see someone be affected so greatly by mental illness was always terrifying and, moreover, sad. Quietly, so as not to startle Mr. Mercer, I entered the room and laid my equipment on the desk. It was at this point that I switched on the audio recorder. What follows is a transcript of that recording. 017 Myself. Good afternoon, Mr. Mercer. My name is Dr. Adrian Cole. I am a psychiatrist and hypnotist, and I have been invited here by Dr. Whitaker to try and treat you. Is that okay with you? 030 Mercer. Murmurs assent weakly while nodding. 057 Myself. Thank you. Now, it is my hope that through the science of hypnosis, I shall be able to restore you to your previous faculties and, moreover, learn what happened to you in August 1962. If you would please look into this light for me, sir, we may get underway. At the time, I used 2 small, portable strobe lights, set at 1-second intervals half a second apart from each other, so that there were 2 flashes of light a second to hypnotize my patients. 2 minutes passed as I waited for the hypnosis to have its desired effect. By the end of this time, Mercer seemed nearly asleep. 304 Mercer, mutters Evelyn. 307 Myself. Excuse me, sir, did you speak? 310 Mercer. Lydia. 313 Myself. Mr. Mercer, do you know where you are? 317 Mercer. No, there's it's so cold. And the walls are alive and, oh God, the smell. 323 Myself. Sir, you are in the Enfield Sanatorium on Quincy Avenue. You're in Boston. 331 Mercer. Don't lie to me. Where are you taking me? You bast. 336 Myself. Mr. Mercer, are you okay? 340 Mercer. Sure, there's something walking past. Oh God, its face. 344 Myself. Sir, I need you to describe this thing to me. What does it look like? 351 Mercer. I cannot describe it to you. I cannot. 354 Myself. Daniel, I need you to tell me. 359 Mercer. No, I cannot. There are not words for what I am seeing right now. A short while passes in silence. All the while, Mercer is sitting still, but a look of pained terror is on his face. 407 Mercer. Thank God, he's gone. I don't think he saw me. 411 Myself. Mercer, can you tell me at all what it looked like? 415 Mercer. I'm sorry now. There was no paper, pencil and paper. For 21 Myself. Mr. Mercer, I'm afraid I am not permitted to give you a pencil. If you give me a couple of minutes, I may be able to get my colleague to give you a felt tip. 438 Mercer. No, there is no time. Please, I need to show you what it looks like now, or I will forget. Please. It should be noted that through the window in the door, I could see Dr. Whitaker shaking his head at me regarding Mr. Mercer's requests. Regardless, I chose to take advantage of the headway we were making and took a pencil out of my pocket to give to the patient. I also procured a piece of drawing paper from my briefcase and gave it to him. 446, Mercer. Oh God. Oh God. They're taking me somewhere. We're moving. 450, myself. You're moving? 453, Mercer. This place, it's my God. It's some sort of ship. We're going somewhere. I have to get out. I have to get out. I have to get back home, please. I have to get out. 506, myself. Sir, please describe what's going on. 510, Mercer. I'm hiding behind one of the walls. They're kind of sticky. There's a brief pause. The only sound of Mercer drawing and myself making notes. 547, Mercer. Oh God, no, please. 551, myself. What's going on? 553, Mercer. One of them is coming towards me. He's got a needle. I don't want to die. Please, God, I don't want to die. 602, myself. Sir? Mr. Mercer? The patient is catatonic for the next 8 minutes. Several times, Dr. Whitaker can be heard knocking at the door, obviously requesting entry. I dismiss him, though, as I worry about inadvertently waking the patient from hypnosis and potentially further damaging his mind. 1411, Mercer. HH. 1413, myself, Mr. Mercer. Are you okay? If you would like me to, I can bring you back now, and that will be the end of our session. 1426, Mercer, no. No, please, no. I need to know. I need to see. Why they brought me here? 1432, myself. And where are you? 1435, Mercer. I'm no longer on the ship. I can see it above me. It's huge and round and unclear, and it's moving. Oh God, they're leaving us behind. No, please don't leave us. 1447, myself. Can you describe your surroundings? Who are you with? 1453, Mercer. There are 8 of us, 8 humans, and a dozen or so of those creatures. They aren't quite like the ones on the ship, though. These ones are wearing some sort of gown. It's heavy and black, and they have ceremonial knives with them. Oh God, one's coming forwards, and he's lifting his knife, and oh God. Mr. Mercer screams for 10 seconds. 1523, myself, Mercer. What is going on? 1526, Mercer. He used the knife, and he cut into my wrist. He had some sort of metal thing, and he inserted it into the bone. Oh God, I can feel it crawling around. I have to get it out. 1541, myself. Focus, Mr. Mercer. Tell me more about the people there, the humans. 1548, Mercer. There are 8 of them. Oh God, they're all screaming. They're all naked, like me, and I think they're all from different languages. One of them is black. 3 people are Asian, 2 Middle Eastern. I see 2 white people besides me, 1 woman. I think she's French. She tried talking to me, but I couldn't understand her. Oh God. They put those things in everyone now. Oh God. One of the Asian people, she's just a child, but they cut her open. 1617, myself. Mr. Mercer, tell me about your surroundings. 1621, Mercer. The ground underfoot is soft and wet. I can't see any vegetation, and it's black, pitch black. It kind of feels like old tree roots. They almost seem to be coming apart under my feet, like I'm in a swamp and being pulled down. It's daytime, but there's fog around us, and there are stars in the sky. Such stars. 1642, myself. Stars? 1643, Mercer. Stars. Beautiful, terrible stars. They're so bright and so vivid and so alive. I can see a moon as well above us, but it doesn't look like Earth's. It's too bright. And the clouds. By God, the clouds. They move so fast, and their colors are shifting, and God save us. 1701, myself, Mr. Mercer. 1703, Mercer. I know why they brought us here. I can see their God. Their God is here, and he is real, and there's no point in praying because this is it. This is the end. Oh God. Oh God. It is huge. 1718, Myself. Mr. Mercer, can you please describe to me what you are seeing? 1724. Mercer. It's some sort of cube, miles tall. The hill rises up above the fog around us, and on top of it, there's this huge mass. It's gray, and my God, the ground isn't roots. This isn't their God. The planet is. The ground is moving, and oh God, they're tentacles, and they're wrapping around the cube. My God, those tentacles, they must be miles long. They're filthy. Their black blood is smearing across the surface, and oh God, they're starting to wrap around us. Bring me back, please. Please, God, save me. 1757. Myself. Daniel, come back to me now. Wake up, come back. You're safe. 1834. Mercer, no. No, it's too late. It's too late. The cube is brightening up, and it's white now, and now it's even brighter, and God, it burns. The light burns. The stars are outshone, and my flesh is searing. Oh God, the girl, the little girl, she's melting, her hair is igniting, and her meat is falling off her bones. Her skull is so white. Oh God, oh God, oh God. 1859, myself, Mercer. Mercer, stay calm. 1904, Mercer, no. No, 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 it's taking me the light. It's taking me, oh God, this is the true light. The true God. Why me? By this point, Dr. Whitaker has entered the room and is attempting to help me restrain Mr. Mercer, who is undergoing violent seizures. Too late, we realize what he is about to do. Taking the pencil which I gave him, he has begun to dig into the flesh of his left wrist, as if trying to find an object. I watch helplessly as he strikes the vein, and blood begins to come out of him in dark gouts. 1916, Mercer, there's something wrong. The ground, it's devoured the girl and the rest, but they don't want me. Why not me? The light is getting brighter and brighter and brighter, and oh God, Evelyn, they're taking me home to Evelyn. What can I say to her? How can I possibly let her see me like this? Oh no, I'd rather die. I'd rather die, but here I am, I'm naked and alone and on the curb at Dartmouth Street. I'd rather die. I'd rather die. 1957, Whitaker. God damn it, Cole, this is on you. You broke the rules. 2002, myself. You can't wake him now. At the very least, we'll lose the progress we've made. This man is speaking for the first time in 18 years. Whitaker, we can't just throw that away. 2016, Whitaker. And if we let you continue, he will die. Do no harm, Adrian. Get out and call an ambulance. For God's sakes, man. By now, Mercer has stopped fighting back and is simply sitting there catatonic. On the tape, my quick departure is audible, as is the sound of the approaching ambulance siren and the paramedics who came to rescue Mercer. After 5 minutes, there is no one left in the room, and the only sound present is the distant, muffled grandfather clock. The tape continues to run for 10 more minutes before it finishes. Nearly 40 years on, and I still haven't experienced anything quite as intense as my interview that day with Daniel Mercer. He survived his self-mutilation on that day in January, and at the General Hospital, the doctors had to remove a small metallic object from his left forearm of unknown origin. If there were records of what happened to this object, they have long since been destroyed. After this surgery, he made a remarkable recovery and, within a month, was released from the Enfield Sanatorium with a clean bill of health. For the rest of his life, he never once mentioned the trauma of August 1962, blaming his scars on a fictional house fire that, according to him, happened to him as a child. He died in 2013 at the age of 84 of a stroke, preceded 2 years earlier by his wife, Evelyn. He was survived by his daughter Lydia and her own children. As his closest surviving kin, I asked her for her permission to publish this story, complete with names. She consented graciously and even offered to help me accurately determine the dates on which certain events occurred. I still keep those drawings that he scrawled in January 1980. As of today, there is still no conclusive evidence to support or deny what Daniel Mercer claims to have happened in 1962 when he was walking through Boston Common. The Black Howlers. It was late October, when my father told me that I would be going out hunting with him. I was 13, and this would be the first time I was allowed to join my father, Thomas, on one of his expeditions. Recently, some of our cows had disappeared from the farm. A few days ago, my father found one of them dead on the edge of the property. He said it was either wolves or coyotes, judging from the bite marks. Being so close to winter, my father and I knew that we couldn't afford to lose any more cattle. We would have to trap and kill whatever it was that had decided our farm would be its new feeding ground. The night we set out, I was caught up in a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Most of the other boys in our village had already been out hunting, and they often made rude jokes to remind me that I was still a whelp. Even though a trace of summer warmth still touched the autumn air, my father told me to wear my wool coat as he checked and loaded our rifles. When we were ready, he grabbed the oil lamp from the front deck and stepped down the stairs. He turned and said with a grin, "No matter what, make sure you know where you're pointing that thing. If I take a bullet from you, I'll haunt you forever." I let out a nervous laugh, but the thought made my stomach twist. Ever since my mother and older brother had passed away, my father and I had only each other to look after. Without him, I wasn't sure what I would do. Earlier that day, my father had taken some scraps from hogs that had been butchered and set traps out along the forest path leading to Silver Mountain. It was the path he was certain was carrying the scent of the farm into the forest. It was the best lead he had anyway. We crossed the pasture until we reached the fence on the edge of the woods. The moon was nearly full, and its light made it easy to see in the dark despite the thin layer of mist that blanketed the open field. My father cursed about needing to cut the trees back farther as he climbed over the fence. He had helped me make it over, the rifle being a new kind of burden for me. We reached the overgrown path, still trodden down to plain dirt in the center. The path was too narrow to walk side by side, so my father led the way. He lit the oil lamp with a match as soon as the tall pines above us blocked out the moonlight. I almost wished he hadn't lit the lamp. Somehow the new light only served to limit how far we could see between the pillars of pine trees surrounding us. There was a brushing noise as something nearby scuffled over leaves and pine needles. The sudden sound caused me to draw in a sharp breath. I whirled around, fumbling to point my rifle in the direction of the noise. "Wait," my father hissed. We paused for a second, but there was no other sound. I turned to give him an anxious glance. "It's probably just a squirrel," Thomas said quietly. "Don't be afraid. There's nothing around at night that isn't there during the day." I nodded and readjusted my grip on the rifle. He nodded back and kept moving. There were a few other noises, the fluttering of wings and a stick snapping in the distance. As time went on, I found myself calmer and less afraid of the dark. This was what all the other boys had gone through, and I wasn't going to let myself stay in their shadow. More than that, I wasn't going to disappoint my father. "We're coming up on the first one," my father whispered. He hunched his shoulders and slowed his pace, walking heel to toe with each step. I matched his posture and kept close. To the right was a small opening in the pine grove. There, Thomas had set up a snare trap around a pile of entrails. He paused to let me catch up until I was standing by his side. He raised the lamp and stepped into the clearing. The entrails were scattered and slightly chewed up. More interesting was that the trap had worked in catching something, but we wouldn't know what it was. Something got caught. All right, my father sighed in frustration, but something else got to it first. He pointed to some ivy leaves on the ground, coated in blood. The pine needles around the ivy were spread out in a way that showed something had been dragged away. Judging by the size of it, it was either a large coyote or a small wolf. My father shook his head and cursed. Then suddenly, a shrill cry of an animal in distress rang out farther down the path. Thomas's head shot up. Without hesitation, he ran full speed back onto the path and deeper into the forest. I wanted to shout for him to wait, but the noise would startle any animals around us, and I knew it would upset him. Instead, I ran as fast as I could keep up. Ahead of me, the dim yellow light from the lamp flickered and faded as he disappeared behind trees and brush. The sounds in front of us were definitely coming from some kind of wild dog. There was growling, howling, and cries that echoed among the blackened trees. I ran, trying not to let my labored breathing make too much noise. I rounded a corner, and ahead, I saw the light of my father's lamp re-emerge into view. Just then, a loud gunshot split the night, followed by the most haunting sound I had ever heard. My father screamed in a way I never thought a man could. There was more growling to accompany his terrified cries. I abandoned all notion of stealth as I sprinted towards the light. I screamed for my father between painful, fiery breaths. Jumping through a thicket of brush, I emerged into another clearing illuminated by the lamp, which was overturned on the ground. The oil had leaked out and caught fire on the forest floor. My father was lying on his chest. Even in the light, the thing hunched over him seemed like a creature made purely of shadow. Without hesitation, I raised my rifle. I lined my sights up with the center of the creature's body and pulled the trigger. The muzzle flash illuminated the animal for an instant. The only thing I recall seeing were enormous claws and a mouthful of bloody, razor-sharp teeth. That was all I saw. The thing moved so quickly that I didn't know which direction it had gone. But I knew that my bullet had made contact because the monster let out a painful wail unlike anything I had ever heard in nature. It was as if the animal had two sets of vocal cords. One was that of a dog, the other more human. The double-octave cry was incredibly loud, echoing through the forest. I was frozen, overwhelmed by what had just happened. The fire that had been started by the overturned lamp spread among the pine needles and leaves, growing into a larger blaze. The light shone on my father, Thomas, who was now kicking and screaming on the ground, rolling and convulsing in a newfound agony. He tore at his shirt as if it too had caught fire. Beneath his collar, I saw a large bite wound that stretched across his shoulder from his upper back to just above his chest. Each fang had left a wide gouge that leaked blood as well as a thick yellow pus. Even though it had only been seconds since he had been bitten, the wound already looked like a long untreated infection. His breathing grew hoarse, and in between his agonized screams, I thought I could hear him trying to say my name. I rushed to his side, trying to find words to calm him, but I could only repeat, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." I grabbed his arm in a panicked attempt to get him back on his feet. I knew I wouldn't be able to drag or carry him out of the forest. I could not let him die. Just as my fingers closed around his arm, his other hand struck my chest, throwing me back onto the ground. Immediately after, I heard a loud snap followed by another terrifying wail of pain. I sat up to see my father lying on his back with his chest arched high. His arms were raised up over and behind his head. It looked as though he were being stabbed in the center of his back. There was another snap as he contorted in the opposite direction. The growing light from the spreading fire illuminated a sight that would stay with me until the day I died. My father's back was not only breaking, it was stretching. He reached behind himself in a desperate attempt to alleviate the torture somehow. And when he did, his arm snapped backwards at the elbow. There was a sickening crunch as the bones in his arms broke themselves in multiple places. With each break, his limbs gained a few inches in length. The awful crunching was joined by a tearing, pressured, stretching noise as his skin strained to keep up with the unnatural growth of his bones. His shoulders buckled together first before snapping apart an extra 6 to 10 inches. And his face imploded as an invisible force suddenly broke the bones of his skull, pushing his nose and mouth inward. His anguished, wild screaming was suddenly cut off as he writhed upon the forest floor. In that sudden silence, I realized I had been screaming the whole time. I fought to get back to my feet, realizing I had dropped my rifle. I looked into my father's eyes, weeping at the ungodly torment reflected there. There was a popping noise and his face suddenly elongated, forming a snout like a horse or a dog. He gagged, choked, and coughed as if something were stuck in his throat. Then, in a spew of bloody vomit, he spat out all of his teeth. The next time he screamed, I saw deadly sharp points emerging from the bloody sockets in his jaws. His scream was different now. It was accompanied by the sound of something inhuman, something wild. Suddenly, I realized with new horror that the sound coming from him was the same double-octave scream growl I had heard from the beast I had shot. The skin around his eyes grew black, and that darkness spread over his face. It leaked through the skin of his neck, spreading across his shoulders. Patches of thick, shining black hairs burst from his flesh. In an instant, the thing writhing before me no longer resembled the man who had raised me. The gentle man who taught me to fish, to ride a horse, to skip stones. He was gone. His screams became less human and more animalistic. And then, the last fragment of my sanity whispered a single rational thought. The most unthinkable thought imaginable. I scanned the ground at my feet and found the rifle I had come with. Tears streaked my face as I pulled the bolt back and pushed a bullet into the chamber. Sobbing, I raised the rifle and lined the sights up with the spot between his eyes. I didn't blink when I pulled the trigger. The unspeakable monster my father had become immediately fell still. My entire body went numb. I collapsed, sobbing like a child. There was no way to comprehend what had just happened. I stared at the corpse before me, uncaring of the blaze, now climbing the pine trees and racing across the forest floor. I wanted the fire to consume me, to take us both away from this dark nightmare. Then suddenly, a howl rose from beyond the inferno. It was a sound from the deepest circle of hell. Before it ended, a chorus of double-voiced roars joined in. The noise pierced through my body, electrifying my spine. I wasn't thinking anymore. I moved on pure instinct, an unquestionable urge to get as far away from that hellish orchestra as I could. I turned and bolted in the direction of the farm. Terror seized every inch of my body. I sprinted with an adrenaline-fueled frenzy toward the safety of the village. The light of the fire quickly faded as I tore through the forest, leaping over roots and rocks. I had no idea if I was still on the path. I simply ran. At one point, I realized I could hear more than my own footsteps. A rapidly growing rustle behind me meant something was chasing. It was moving incredibly fast. In the darkness, I still saw my father's horrified, agonized eyes in my mind. I begged God not to let that happen to me. I ran faster than I thought possible, my body numb to exhaustion. The rustling gained a new sound, a ravenous growl. I knew I was close to reaching the edge of the property when I saw traces of moonlight through the thinning canopy. In the growing light, I dared to look back. Only several yards away, I saw the roiling figure of another dark beast charging after me on all fours. Behind it, two more were in pursuit. I didn't look back again. I was sure that any second I would feel the weight of a beast fall on me. Claws first, then those awful teeth. Then the burning, the snapping bones, the stretching flesh. Agony, terror, and then whatever hell followed. The edge of the forest came upon me faster than I could react. I ran full into the fence. My torso flipped over the top, and I landed hard on my face and stomach. In any other circumstance, the fall would have left me breathless. But adrenaline forced me back to my feet. Just then, I was ripped backward. The beast had caught me. It snarled as it tore into my back. I wailed but felt no pain. That's when I realized it hadn't bitten into me, but into the thick wool coat my father had insisted I wear. I dropped the rifle I hadn't realized I was still carrying and rolled out of the jacket in a single motion. Once free, I sprinted with new speed, fueled by a flicker of hope. At some point, probably when I first heard the chorus of howls, the cattle had managed to break free from their pen. They ran in large circles across the pasture, panicked and desperate for shelter. I ran through the stampeding cows toward the house. Behind me, I heard the distressed moaning of livestock being pounced upon by the hellhounds. I glanced back just long enough to see the beast that had been chasing me now choosing easier, meteor prey. I wasted no time in putting more and more distance between them and myself. I ran right past my house, determined to reach the safety of the village, to the company and protection of other human beings. My father's farm was just outside of the small neighborhood. I ran, my legs and chest on fire, tears soaking my face up and over the hill. The light of the village was my salvation, and I raced in that direction until I crested the hill beyond my father's farm. It was the hill that overlooked the village. When I saw the source of light ahead of me, my feet skidded to a stop on their own. I fell to my knees. Fire. Nearly the entire village was engulfed in flames. Even from the distance, I could see the figures of men and women frantically scrambling as they fled from larger, more menacing silhouettes. Screams of terror and anguish rose up with the smoke and fire, mixed with a growing number of ungodly howls and roars. The longer I watched, the fewer people I saw. More and more beasts, my former neighbors, darted back and forth among the flames. Howling from behind me jolted me back to my senses. My feet began moving once more. I ran closer to the village, not knowing where else to go. I ran until I came across the small culvert just outside of town. Throwing myself off to the side, I fell into the stony river with a painfully shallow splash. Wasting no time, I crawled into the small opening of the culvert, hiding myself under the road. Above me, I heard the pounding of paws as the beasts raced toward the slaughter. Exhausted, terrified, and shivering, I sat in catatonic horror. I listened as my entire world was savagely torn apart by the fangs and claws of absolute nightmares. The terrified screaming of friends and neighbors devolved into agonized wailing, which, over time, was completely replaced by an overwhelming chorus of double-voiced howls. The Nameless House. It's funny, really. You finish college, get yourself a degree, maybe stay shacked with your folks for a few years longer while the paychecks build up, and, well, eventually, your own place pops up. You wake up one morning as an overgrown version of the kid you used to be, and the next, well, you're a man. You've got bills and responsibilities, and you're suddenly allowed to start harboring expectations of your own. But most importantly, you're free. You've got your own space. I don't know at which point it happened for me, but my parents' home just stopped doing it. Things that had been so cozy for so long suddenly became cramped and annoying. My own room barely felt private. I could barely afford to stock the fridge with what I felt like eating, but the point is that once I stood in front of that house, just a short drive away from the highway, I felt free. The real estate agent told me it was a bit of a fixer-upper thanks to some obviously shoddy construction, but it didn't really bother me. I mean, damn it, I was home. It took a while for me to start noticing just how crooked the place was. I didn't complain, though. I'd set a price limit that pretty much had starving artist written on it, and I loved the location. The paratransport service worked flawlessly in the area, and I still had the advantage of general solitude. The place was newly built, too. Aside from these vices, that crooked appearance it had, everything was absolutely flawless. It wasn't big, really. One bedroom, one guest room, a reasonably sized living area right next to a kitchenette with its own little stretch of countertop. That's it. There was the basement, too, plus the parking lot, but these wouldn't catch my eye until much later. The real estate agent had told me it had been a real find at this particular price margin, and that for some odd reason, none of the nearby developers remembered building anything on that particular lot. For that matter, for all the searching she did, she never did find the lot number for that house in any of the local registries. Now, a savvier person than myself would have realized something was odd a long time ago. I didn't. I was young. I worked 3 odd jobs to pay the bills. The place wasn't much more than a dorm for myself and my occasional friends, and I was generally out at all hours of the day and night. More often than not, the place was locked up tight. If distance hadn't been enough of a factor to dissuade any would-be burglars, then my meager possessions would have done the job. Like a lot of newly emancipated guys around my age, I live surrounded by hand-me-downs and thrift store horror stories, horribly mismatched items I didn't really care all that much about. Like I said, though, the house was crooked, slightly stilted to the left, if I remember correctly. The oddest thing is that it only became obvious if you looked at the upper corners in each room, where the ceiling and walls met. Pull out a laser guide, though, or your smartphone's level app, and you'd realize that the place was actually leveled out. Your eyes would keep reporting the odd bend, but everything else reacted as though the house was entirely straight. The basement, though, was interesting. First, the entire place smelled new. You ever smelled a freshly installed window frame before? It's got that acrid, almost antiseptic tang, that unmistakably new plastic scent that sticks on clamshell wrappers in a more muted variant. Some friends of mine called it the new keyboard smell, but the thing is the house looked like it had just been built and it didn't show up on any lot registries. Everyone around me more or less went through the same logical hoops and assumed the place hadn't been fully squared out before the real estate agent sold it to me. Even she was surprised, and her own bosses just shrugged it off, assuming some paperwork was missing. Everyone told me I'd eventually receive a call from City Hall asking me to come and fix up a few administrative niggles or issues, basically sign my name on a couple dotted lines. The basement, though, that looked old. The door leading down had that same plastic-ish smell, but the stairs were creaky, the wood polished by what looked like generations of someone's routine trekking up and down. I'd say about 20 inches were poking from below the ground, leaving enough space for a couple windows. The place was barren, like I said, all concrete. It was cracked and pitted and stained, and, well, never mind how new the rest of the place was, the basement just didn't fit. At first, I figured I'd just bought someone else's semi-thorough renovation job, something that had involved tearing down an original construction while keeping the foundations in the basement. Things actually started making a turn for the sinister around that basement, now that I think about it. The place was poorly lit, no matter how much you tried making sure nothing grew over the window panes outside. I couldn't afford to have other lights installed, so I stuck with the one dingy light bulb that tried its damnedest to cast some shadows in the corners of the room. At night, that really made me anxious. I'd watch a couple horror movies, realize I'd left the laundry in the washer and needed to make the switch before the clothes would start stinking up the place, get down there, and generally hate being there. The shadows in the corners were too thick for my liking, but I figured that was just me being used to having my own basement, my own dark patches. There was nobody around to help me cement any sort of routine in a place, so I guess the newness of these shadows never really left me. So one night, I'm bringing my laundry upstairs when I hear the sound of something like pebbles gently hitting the ground. I turn around, spin my head this way and that for a few seconds, and generally try to get a bead on the sound until I realize it's coming from the far right corner, directly opposite from my washer and dryer. I don't have a flashlight, of course, because stupid first-time homeowner, so I nearly break my neck trying to angle the one light bulb I've got in that corner's direction. There's a crack snaking down alongside the right-hand wall, and I've never noticed it before. The little pitter-patter I was hearing, that was the crack gently widening, pushing down towards the floor and making little flecks of surface-level paint and concrete fall to the ground. Again, I don't think much of it at first, filing that under the several anecdotal problems I noticed that kind of lent credence to the fact that the place was, indeed, a fixer-upper. I mean, I'm sort of past due from my first lessons on caulking up walls, right? A few days pass, and that same pitter-patter of falling flecks of paint and concrete wakes me up in the middle of the night. I remember confusing it for a leaky faucet, so I got out of bed and double-checked my two sinks. They were both fine. As I'm heading back to bed, I have a clear view of my room's rear wall by the light of my bedside table that allows me to notice the exact same crack snaking its way down towards the floor, dead center in the wall. It's the shape of the crack that sticks out, really. Something about it makes me take a peek downstairs in the basement and allows me to confirm that odd hunch I've been having. The pattern is identical. Every single ripple and wave across both crack is identical. Even the size and shape of the flecks of plaster and paint are the same. I remember staring at the basement's crack, at that realization, and briefly feeling something ominous, something cold, slithered deep into my chest. Then, maybe out of exhaustion, that somehow snaps back into place. I mean, really, matching cracks in the walls? I shake my head and tell myself I'll just buy some caulk at the hardware store the next day and try and work on my first patch-up job ever. Had to happen at least once, right? I did caulk everything shut the very next day, and I do remember feeling pretty good about myself for that. The creaking noises, though, they'd start during the following night. New houses don't settle into place, especially not in warm climates like mine. New houses just are, and it takes a decade or two before humidity does its work and nails start to pop, right? Well, at night, once everyone was gone and there'd be nobody left but myself in that place, it'd creak. Not just a little, oh no, a lot. Far too much to fit any sort of recently constructed house. I had contractors come and give it a once-over. I even had one of the walls between the bathroom and the living room partially torn down, just so I could look at the retaining beams. Everything was fine if I went by the contractor's word, but God, did the place freaking creak at night. I'd go to bed, the floor popping and snapping under my feet the whole while, and maybe have an hour or two's worth of peace and quiet. Then, absolutely out of nowhere, the hallway's floor would let out loud, agonizing groans, almost as if someone were tearing up the flooring right outside my bedroom door. Sometimes, the sound would be syncopated, like someone hurriedly making straight for my bedroom and just stopping, straight in front of it too. About 3 months in, I couldn't even sleep in my own room. The door frames creaked and popped so much it sounded like someone was banging on the door pane all night long. If only that had been it. If only nothing else had happened. A year in, I'd wake up and go for a drink at the kitchenette and find myself staring at the pitch-black emptiness outside. By day, you could see a fairly wide expanse of the kind of underbushes that make up unattended lots that are just waiting for the construction crews to show up. I'd hear rodents and crickets. Plenty of cats from the surrounding neighborhoods, too. The developer seemed more interested in giving my street a wide berth, and nobody could tell me why. I was growing more and more isolated, and it became frighteningly obvious after dark. I mean, you couldn't see anything. No trees, no bushes, no grass, no streetlights, no distant gleams off of someone else's headlights down the road. Nothing. Turning on my porch light past dusk, I'd step out and find myself just staring out into the void. Sometimes you'd hear voices. Shouts too. They never sounded too menacing, and they generally did sound like the sort of stuff you'd have expected to come from my neighbors. During the day, all I had to do to get a glimpse of civilization was look past the old trees that were just on the other side of the residential development's shared fence. You'd see it, a row of cottages coming out of the same cloning farm/architectural firm that crapped out affordable living spaces for young couples and families looking to own a slice of the suburban life at a fraction of the cost. You'd hear them, too, calling out for their kids, planning barbecues, bringing in their groceries. Typical stuff, really. Nobody ever went past the trees, though. The people I paid, expected, or hosted did come over, but none of the locals ever tried to throw a housewarming for me. The people I did see just didn't like my house. Something about it was rubbing them the wrong way, and they could never tell me why. I'd hear all of them at night and some other sounds. Odd sounds, really. Things I thought were car alarms, but that kept sounding more and more like oddly sibilant screams the more I thought about it. 2 years passed, and I was living with the cracks, the pops, and the creaks, convincing myself I'd lived in plenty of other houses with symptoms like these. Even condos. I had, but I could have understood where everything came from before. This, if I thought about it, that old anxiety, that cold I mentioned earlier, would grip my chest and squeeze like a vice. One night, I got sick of it all. I'd set some money aside, and I wanted to figure out what the hell was happening with the place. The cracks, exact duplicates of that first one, were practically everywhere now. I bought myself an electronic level, some more caulk, and more or less resolve to take a slurry of photos. I'd email it all to my old real estate agent and ask her if there's any way she could have known about the more rational aspects of all this beforehand. The cracks, the creaking, I mean, there had to be something, right? If nothing came up, then I'd sue her ass. Nothing she'd said, nothing she'd ever mentioned had ever prepared me for anything like this. And I'd be damned before I'd go down without earning some of that peace and quiet I'd wanted. To be honest, I couldn't do more than half of the living room. By the time I looked at the second corner at the far left end of the room, I knew, absolutely knew, that nothing about any of this made sense. The level told me the walls were straight. Yet if I tried to look, honestly peer at the spot where all three walls met, I'd realize that the angles were shifting. The walls moved if you looked at their exact point of intersection, and they become fixed in place if you looked away. The more you looked, the more the house creaked, and the more it swayed. You couldn't see it sway. Oh no, and nor could you feel it, but the house swayed, the whole damn world outside swayed, and you swayed with it all. I remember falling off of my stepladder and losing it for maybe 10 minutes. I was gone. Maybe I hit my head on the television's corner while falling. I'm not sure, but the light had changed by the time I came to. The moon was out, a big, pale, bloated thing, and it covered everything I owned in a kind of silvery pale I wouldn't have called moonlight for anything in the world. There was a crack on the floor, right between my legs. I backed away, disgusted. I felt that the fissures were vile. They were abhorrent, awful things that offended everything I took for granted about this world's rules. Looking at them made me sick, but I couldn't stop. I tried for something I'd never done before, at least not directly. The last time I tried, I'd had caulking gloves. I'd never felt the porous texture of the edge of the world. I touched. I don't know what I touched, but it gave away like cheesecloth. Then I saw. Imagine everything. Every place, every person, every color, every scent, every concept, every notion. Imagine everything we have, everything we're still looking for, everything we've been, are, or will ever be. Imagine living at the crossroads of that. Imagine yourself standing there in that fixed instant. That forever and that never that nobody should have ever seen. Individually, the pieces are beautiful, ordinary looking on occasion. Some notes are offensive, others reach for your heart. And there's a few smells that remind me of colors from continents past, wavelengths we haven't heard in a million years. That old radio tune, From Far and Away, it'll only reach us once we're dead and dust. It's terrifying. No mind should witness this. No person should ever have to touch this. When I came to, I knew all about the house, and the knowledge was tearing at my mind like a flock of carrion birds. I had to get it out. I had to spit it out, carve it out of my head with a melon baller, sear it away with a blowtorch. The house isn't a place. It isn't an entity. It isn't fixed in time or in space, and you'll find it atomized across all of creation. My garage was in the radiation-blasted wastelands of Topeka, Kansas. My living room was somewhere on an opal summit lost in some silent corner of the M83 galaxy. Chunks of my basement were in the realm of the skinless god. Minuscule flecks lodged in the infected pores of blind and deaf beasts howling inside their steel boxes. My entryway is one of the paving stones to infinity, a fleck of limestone the great beings beyond time never even notice. The house is a thing, lashed together by some sick mind who was curious to see what would happen if you made parts of all that is touch in the most abhorrent of ways, twisted and snapped together, so the final product would look innocent, a nice and safe little hole for the one poor idiot with a nearly void bank account who needed a space to call home. I'm not even sure when or where I'm writing this, but I know all who will ever read this. I know where they'll find it, in places where I'll never set foot. I know the house can be anywhere, in any place, and in any time. Anybody could find this. Pick a highway and drive. Look off to the side, past the point where sane people stop building. If you see a house that looks slightly off, a place that seems perfect for you while still somehow carrying something you can't quite place. Keep driving. Don't stop. You'll find it again, across months and miles and years. You'll find it in books and movies and in lyrics. Don't watch it. Don't listen to anything that's said about it. But you can't you? You can't stop it. Not any more than I ever could. I've written about the house, this damn place beyond all places. You've done your part. You've read this story. Where I am now, I can see you, lashed in the fibers of the paint, reduced to a hair-thin film across all surfaces. You're the house, and the house is in you. The silent closet. Back when we were 6, my brother developed a notorious sleepwalking habit among his various other disorders. So much so that Dad child-proofed the doors to our room and closet after an unfortunate pissing incident involving a soiled pile of clothes, so that when we were awake, we could leave, but asleep, no dice. It was one of those plastic coverings that you had to squeeze and turn simultaneously, you know, the ones that are impossible for anybody under the age of 18 to possibly hope to open due to the sheer amount of pressure it took to turn the damn knob. I'm being facetious now, but I really hated that damn child-proof bullshit. But due to his sleepwalking, he was kept on the bottom bunk. Some nights, he'd wake up and try to leave the room, tugging on the door and only succeeding in making an unnecessary amount of racket, only to fall back asleep at the foot of the door after his failure. Before the child-proof door, there were only a select few places he'd go, but it became a game of hide and seek with him. I found him inside the toy box once, and I just remember thinking, how did he even fit himself in there? When these incidents happened, and that was at least 3 times a week, I took it upon myself to get him safely back in his bed when I actually caught him, so long as he didn't wander past the stairs, which thankfully now wasn't very possible. I hated the stairs. Well, not so much the stairs as the hallway that my room was at the end of leading to the stairs around the corner. That place was hellish at night. Yes, I was terrified of the dark, more so of my own wild imagination spurring the darkness to life with monstrous intents. I was sure we were plagued with a closet-residing boogeyman or a homicidal shadow dweller, maybe even a neighborhood serial killer. My father, God bless the man, every night before bed, he'd open the closet door, reach up and pull the dangling string to turn the light bulb on. The switch had shorted on our 6th birthday, and search the closet for my own reassurance. Sometimes he'd even make a show of it and enter with a baseball bat or a plastic gun, threatening the monster hiding in there. Every time he did it, there was nothing in that closet. There never was. My brother wasn't afraid of the closet like I was. On the lower bunk, sometimes he'd climb the ladder and sleep with me after I'd been sitting up and staring at the closet for what seemed like hours. It was like my fear woke him up. They say twins have inexplicable bonds. I always had this strange sensation like I was being watched, or perhaps the feeling of knowing someone's talking about you. I knew I held something's attention, and that thought kept me up in such discomfort for what seemed like hours. In reality, I probably had the attention span to stay up thinking for half an hour before succumbing to sleep. And stranger still, it wasn't every night. In hindsight, that made me feel uneasy. If a child is afraid of the dark, weren't they afraid of it every night? Don't get me wrong, I feared the dark, but obviously I was safe under the covers. Most nights, it was merely a childish fear. And some nights, that fear evolved into uneasiness I can't explain, like violation of my privacy. And no amount of blankets made me feel better. Something was there, and it was watching. I knew it was. I always expected to see a pair of glowing eyes behind the blinds of the closet door, but I never did. One night in particular stayed in my memory all the way into adulthood. The first detail that's strange in hindsight is that I was already asleep. Something woke me up, not violently, but suddenly, and I still have no idea what. There was this cold that had settled on the room, and not like a winter cold that could freeze water, but this stale, stiff cold, like an abandoned house. The same stillness and cold I would feel several years later when grandmother died in her hospital bed, and how her skin felt just minutes afterward. Lifeless. and a smell wafted through the air like really burnt steaks and rotten trash cans. I grimaced and said groggily, "Geez, did you fart?" waving my hand in front of my face. There was no reply, so I dangled my head over the edge to peer at the lower bunk. Not surprisingly, he wasn't in his bed. Illuminated dinosaurs chasing each other endlessly around our room, projected from our spinning night lamp, was the only source of light. A disco ball of dinosaurs, if you will. I traced them around the room to find it empty with the exception of me. I knew that wasn't true. Climbing down the ladder, my feet slapped against the wood floor, sending an uncomfortable shock of cold up my legs. As I turned, the room seemed to widen. It was the moment that makes children gulp in uncertainty. The sudden loss of familiarity. I was in my room, but I felt uncomfortable, the same discomfort when you stare off of a cliff, knowing that one false step and you will die. Completely exposed. But I trudged on, searching for my misplaced sibling. He wasn't on the floor in front of the door. He wasn't on top or inside of our toy box. I dropped to my knees to find the space under the bed empty. Was it possible he somehow got out of the room? When he used to leave the room, there were 3 places he typically was. The hallway bathroom, notably curled up in the corner between the vanity and toilet, in Dad's old red chair in the upstairs living room right down the hall, and to the left, or somewhere downstairs, a place I dare not tread in the darkness alone. I padded to the door and squeezed the plastic-covered doorknob with both hands, struggled with the damn thing for a moment, and pulled it open. I was greeted with pitch blackness. The dark hallway, now looming ominously in front of me. There were no windows. The only source of moonlight would be around the corner, where a window was beside the staircase. The hallway wasn't just dark, of course not. It was never that easy. No, it had to be pitch black. It made me even more uncomfortable, staring out into that blackness with my pulse steadily rising. I could hear my heart beating in my ears. Anything could be out in that darkness. I felt like I'd see a pair of eyes staring back at me. Whatever was in that darkness had no eyes, or at least they didn't glow like in the movies. But I jumped at the sight of a long, black shadow cast from behind me, freezing in terror as it disappeared. It happened again, casting my shadow across the hallway's floor. The nightlight on our dresser that cast dinosaurs on the walls of our room, and now out in the hallway. On the bright side, I had a source of light now. I was transfixed, staring out into the dark hallway as it lit up with the distorted dinosaur. I looked down. My toes were barely behind the baseboard that separated the wood flooring from the carpeted hallway. Before I crossed that line, I needed to make sure there was nothing hiding in that darkness. Anything could hide in shadows that black. The dim light flashed from behind me. My eyes caught something unnatural. I could have sworn someone was pressed against the wall at the end of the hallway to the right, like they wanted to plaster their back to the wall. It didn't really register until the light had already passed. I gulped. My body tensed uncomfortably, eyes locked on the darkness where that person had been standing. In this darkness, they could have moved wherever it saw fit to move. It could be 5 feet in front of me, for all I knew. With that thought, I was dreading the next pass of light. Did I really want to see this thing? Before I could even answer myself, the light passed over again, and the shadowy figure remained, unmoved. Because it was the shadow of the open bathroom door, resting door knob length away from the wall. Just my imagination. I released a shaky breath, satisfied that the hallway was empty, and lifted my foot, slowly, unsteadily crossing my perceived line of safety out into the unprotected blackness of my house, made foreign by the nighttime. My toes curled into the carpet, tense like the rest of my body, like I was holding onto the railing on a roller coaster. The light passed by again, and I kept my eyes peeled, stopping my movement completely as it did, just for safety. If I could just get to the bathroom, I could turn on the light. The hallway light was beyond the bathroom, so that was out of the question. I had to be brave. I traversed the darkness, taking long steps on my tippy toes just to stay quiet in case something were actually in that darkness. My whole body would stiffen when the light passed behind my back, only to continue and try and cover as much distance as possible while I was still hidden by the shadows. The whole time I had that feeling of being completely exposed in this hallway, as if I were actually being hunted. I kept thinking, what if I'd missed something and now whatever it was in the hallway moved behind me? I dare not turn. I pictured a vile creature staring right into the back of my head, breathing down the back of my neck. If I turned, I'd only be greeted by sickly, glowing eyes and a wicked smile. So I didn't. But finally, I made it to the bathroom without incident. But my joy was short-lived as I peered into the pitch blackness that was the bathroom. And this time, there was no dim light to chase away the shadows, if only for the brief moment. The light switch was on the left-hand side, right above the counter and under the medicine cabinet. I had to tippy-toe to reach it. I gulped down my fear. Now or never. I strode inside with purpose and ignored the chill of having my back exposed yet again, but to a completely unknown abyss. Even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The light flicked on, and my worst fear was realized in full. Just like I had pictured, it was behind me. A black mass I barely caught a glimpse of in the mirror because I jumped and spun almost immediately. I was being watched by a dark-colored towel hanging on the rack behind me. My breath slowed as my near heart attack was avoided. Just my stupid imagination. There was nothing in here. I had peeked my head behind a shower curtain just to be safe. Disappointingly, the bathroom was empty, which meant I was still alone in the night. One place left to look outside of my room. Dad's chair, which meant a trek further into the unknown. Worse than that, this journey involved a corner. That might not seem significant, but something could easily hide around a corner and jump out without warning. Corners at nighttime were terrifying. I peeked out into the hallway, looking both ways and seeing only what I saw during the day thanks to the bathroom light. My fears were unwarranted. The hallway was empty. Thankfully, I didn't even feel like I was being watched anymore. Just my imagination, just like always. But my heart stopped in the next moment. There was a sound like a light thump coming from my room, as if somebody was knocking on the walls. My face warmed uncomfortably as my head turned slowly back toward my room. All those other times I only felt watched or was afraid of seemingly nothing. This was a sound. This was a tangible sense. It was waiting in my room. It must have snuck past me while I was in the bathroom. But could I have possibly imagined that? Maybe just a pipe or something. Another thump that caused my legs to stop working. I definitely hadn't imagined it. I stared down the hallway into my open room intently. My eyes must have been the size of the bathroom doorknob that my hand squeezed so tightly. I was unable to move, even a little bit. I knew it was waiting. I just didn't know what was waiting. The silence was deafening. I could only hear my own heart beat faster and faster, and a buzzing in my head that got louder and louder the longer I stared. There was again. Thump. I jumped into action, quickly spinning around, searching frantically for some sort of weapon. I took the head off of my electric toothbrush, leaving only a small metal tip that I could jab into the monster. Now that I knew where it was, I didn't mind shutting the bathroom light off and walking back toward the room. In fact, I thought I'd be able to surprise the fiend. I made it to the baseboard once more, reluctant to pass back into my room. I stared inside, waiting with bated breath for any signs of movement. Surely it would try and take me, right? The cartoon illuminated dinosaurs dancing on the walls suddenly seemed more feral with jagged teeth that threatened to eat me. They were no longer comforting as they were meant to be, and the shadows they left took shapes of horrifying creatures of the night, just waiting for me to step inside so they could pounce on me. Inanimate objects now seemed to move ever so slightly on their own accord. The heater sounded like a monster in the vents. The breeze pushing tree branches against the windows looked like clawed monsters scraping to get inside. And then there was a sound that took all of my attention away from everything else. A long scratching, as if this monster dragged the tip of its claw along the walls. It came from the closet, the one door that freezes every child in fear. Fear of the unknown, of what could be behind that door, of what your imagination puts behind that door. The boogeyman, and I knew he was in there. I knew it. I stepped inside of the room and stood in front of the closet, both hands gripping my toothbrush so tight that my knuckles were white. That shuddered. White doors seemed to stare back at me. It has to be standing behind that door, which meant that it was only a few short feet away from me. This thin piece of wood was all that separated me from my nightmare. I promise there's nothing in the closet. My dad's voice rang in my head. There never was. Every time he checked the closet, nothing was in there. But this was different. I was alone now. I felt as though the boogeyman was daring me to open the door, to see what would happen if I did. Heart pounding like a machine gun, face hot like the stove, throat scratchy and dry like dirt. I found it hard to move my limbs like they had all fallen asleep. And then my heart froze over as dread descended down on me like a bucket of water. There was a soft click and light flooded from the shutters of the door. Something was in there, and it turned on the light. I needed to get Dad. That was the only thought in my mind. I wanted to scream for him, but my voice didn't work. I wanted to run as fast as I could away from that closet, but my feet were glued to the floor. I heard a light shuffling on the other side of that door, and my body stiffened even more if at all possible. My eyes must have been popping out of their sockets. This was it. It was going to take me. Suddenly my legs were working again, stepping backward, feet clumsily stumbling over themselves. I landed on my rear, my toothbrush clattering along the floor. Was that self-preservation kicking in? Was this what fearing for your life felt like? Ethan, I heard my name spoken in a small, muffled whimper that accompanied the shuffling. I blinked. Noah, is that you? It was my brother. Oh God, it was only him. Just Noah. I thought I was going to cry from the relief. I pushed myself up very quickly and struggled with the child lock, pulling the door open. He was sitting in the back of the closet, hugging his knees beside some clothes that had fallen. Cue the hangers scraping the wall, and my brother thumping around. Oh, thank God. He looked just as terrified as I had. I ran in the closet and hauled him to his feet as he asked me how he got in there. Sleepwalking, you doofus. I thought you were a monster. My hand stayed clamped on his as if I'd lose him if I let go, still shaking from residual adrenaline. He had a look of uneasiness, trepidation, and pure confusion. I opened the door. I had to pause. How did he get in the closet? I had to squeeze the plastic with both hands and actively try to turn the knob. No way he did it in his sleep. Well, he had to have. How else would he have gotten in? Though at that moment, I didn't really care. I just shrugged. This little night of horrors was done, and I just wanted to sleep. I helped him back to his bed before turning back to the closet. I stood on my toes to flick the switch down. Only it was already down. I gazed up to see the cord Dad always pulled to turn the light on dangling, swinging lightly back and forth. The tingle at the crown of my head shot through my entire body as cold realization struck me. How did you turn on the light? I shakily asked. I didn't.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.